I've seen a lot of shirtless guys that I wasn't attracted to, and I was never like, oh, put something on, oh, go, whatever. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be jumping back into Star Wars and talking about The Last Jedi. So I'm going to do kind of the same setup as I did with the last one, where I talked about how I felt about the movie when I first saw it, and then whether or not the book was different and how it was different, whether it expanded on the story, and whether or not I think it was worth it to read. So I have notes, but let's get into how I felt about the movie initially. So when I first saw The Last Jedi in theaters, I was super torn about it and actually very angry. Like, I was super annoyed by the whole thing. There's a lot in The Last Jedi that just didn't make any sense going into it from The Force Awakens, and it definitely took some of the characters that were very beloved and put them in a very unflattering light. So, mainly Luke. So if you've seen it, then you know, but if not, it's all going to be spoilers, so don't watch. But the movie was, to me, really a mixed bag. So we start off with Rey going to find Luke, and Luke basically rejecting her and telling her he's not going to teach her. And all of it just left me very uninterested. The one thing I really feel like The Last Jedi movie had going for it was the Rey and Kylo relationship that is happening because they can hear each other through the Force. They can talk to each other. So that was a really interesting aspect of the movie. But the setup from The Force Awakens, where Finn and Rey really seem like they're going to be a duo and there's going to be this kind of relationship, well, Finn and Rey are not together at all until through this whole movie. At the very end, they meet up again, but Finn is on a ship and he's by himself, and then they introduce the character of Rose. So this movie just didn't work for me because of that. It really took what was an interesting setup from The Force Awakens and made it a very different kind of movie. So where we thought that Poe and Finn and Rey might all kind of be doing adventures together, kind of a Han, Leia, Luke, scenario. This movie really went in the direction of, let's split everybody up. Everybody's doing their own thing. Nobody's together. Everybody is separate. And having them all kind of doing their own stuff just was not that great. It just made it a little bit harder to be interested in what was happening, and it really hurt the dynamic that you had from the beginning of especially Rey and Finn's relationship. And I think Rian Johnson was really trying to go a totally different direction, and he did, and some of it worked and some of it really didn't. I do like the aspect of Rey and Kylo being able to hear each other. I thought it worked really well. I didn't like the whole gambling casino planet. That was really dumb. Actually, the whole side quest for Rose and Finn was boring to me. I thought it could have been completely taken out of the movie and I would not have missed it. It was not interesting. It added nothing to me. And it actually really hurt the movie, in my opinion, because it extended the runtime in a way that you didn't care about without adding anything, when they could have inserted something a lot more interesting and use that time to explore something that would have been great, which I'll get into. So yeah, it didn't work. There was some really great scenes. I will say, when Rian Johnson does a good scene, it's a really good scene. The scene where Rey and Kylo fight and together and join forces, and Snoke is killed and all that. It's a really great scene. It's super entertaining. There's a lot to like about it. And then, the end scene with Luke, I have issues with, but overall it was an interesting and well-filmed scene. I was really frustrated with the aspect of how they introduced the Rey and Kylo relationship. For the fact that people were like, oh, that came out of nowhere, what is this? And I didn't feel that way at all. I knew after the second movie that Reylo was going to be a huge thing in the third movie, because there is no reason at all, I write for fun, but no reason as a writer to insert a scene where Kylo Ren is shirtless and Rey sees it if that's not going to be something. For her to see him and see him without his shirt on and be drawn to him and be embarrassed doesn't make any sense if she's not attracted to him. I've seen a lot of shirtless guys that I wasn't attracted to, and I was never like, oh, put something on, oh, go, whatever. It doesn't bother you if you don't care about the person or if you're not attracted to them. Who cares? So when people who saw their movie told me that the Reylo relationship came out of nowhere, I was like, did you see that scene in the second movie? It's not out of nowhere. That was definitely happening. It was very heavily foreshadowed that there was going to be something going on, and she had an attraction to him that was seemingly a lot stronger than anything she's felt for Finn. Also, and I know this has been pointed out before, Finn's character should have died in that movie. I like Finn. This is not against Finn, but he had a really powerful moment at the end where he was trying to save everyone, and his whole perspective had changed. He was all about Rey. I'm going to find Rey. I'm going to save Rey. This is all that mattered to him, was just getting Rey and finding somewhere safe to hide. And at the end of the movie, he's totally changed, and he's willing to sacrifice himself for the rebellion, and he should have been able to. And Rose stops that, and that's kind of messed up because his character should have gone out like a hero and had that moment, and it would have been really great and powerful, and Finn deserved it. And instead, we got that really awkward, awful kiss scene, and it was, no, that wasn't working for anybody. There was some insta-love in that movie that would have made Stephenie Meyer blush. Like, please. Finn and Rose knew each other for all of 2 seconds, and then she's kissing him like, we have to save the things we love. Okay, let's pull back a little there, honey. That's not okay. So that's my thoughts on the movie. So the book is a little bit different and actually added quite a bit to the story. So whereas the first book, The Force Awakens, added hardly anything to the actual movie, this adds quite a bit. You get a whole scene in the beginning where Luke is imagining his life as if he never joined the Resistance. He never answered the call, never tried to find Obi-Wan Kenobi, and he's married and happy. And it kind of shows you that Luke sacrificed a lot to be in the Resistance, and he could have had a whole other life that was fulfilling and good for him, and he didn't get any of it. He's basically, alone and a hermit by the time we get to him in this, and he's bitter. And I think that if this scene would have been in the movie, and it showed him having this dream of this other life and showed that he really doubted his choices, that you would have felt a lot more sympathy for him. Instead, you don't. You don't feel any sympathy for him because he comes off as a jerk, and his bitterness doesn't seem as justified when you're not seeing the regret that he has about his life and what he could have had if he wouldn't have been this Resistance hero. In the movie, you just feel like, what's wrong with Luke? Why isn't he Luke anymore? So I think that was sad that they didn't add that into the movie. They could have taken out that stupid gambling scene. Anyway, so the next thing that is in the book versus the movie is a whole scene introducing Rey's sister Paige, who we do see at the beginning of the movie. She dies. But in the book, there's a whole explanation of them, the planet they're from, their backstory of what happened there. And Paige is, like, her death later is a lot more emotional because she is actually introduced to us, and we know a little bit about her and Rose's relationship, and that they're basically, as close as twins, and they've always been together. So that would have been something nice to have, in the movie, but no. The other thing that is in the book versus the movie is a whole memorial scene for Han Solo, which was really good. And it has Leia giving a big speech, and she talks about things, how Han would have hated it, and he wouldn't have wanted this big memorial and everybody being sad, but she still gives the whole speech to the Resistance and talks about him, and that he had made this, like, doll for her on Endor when they were with the Ewoks, and, like, she had thought it was not very good, but anyway, like, she puts it there, and it's a memorial to him, and it's really touching and actually helps you to feel like the character got, like, they mourned. It, I think, was necessary and probably should have been more hinted at in the movie, or at least shown to be something with Han Solo. This is a huge character, and even Luke mourning Han Solo, which is in the book, is not shown in the movie. I believe that scene was cut. And that's, it just doesn't make sense when you know their relationship and the closeness that they had. They should have kept that in there. There are also more scenes with Admiral Holdo and Admiral Akbar, and there's scenes from BB-8's perspective that are not obviously there because BB-8's a droid and he's not, like, we're not in his head or whatever, his parts, I guess. So yeah, I did think that there was some really great stuff added in to the book versus the movie. The other thing that is good, Rose definitely calls out Finn on his attachment to Rey, which is something we all know is a thing. But when Rose is like, stop pining for Rey, all you care about is Rey, it kind of makes the whole aspect of her kissing him at the end seem very weird, because she knows about his attachment to Rey and it's very strong, and he has this bond to her and this devotion to her that, although it might not be earned, I mean, whatever, it's there. And for Rose to then kiss him at the end, it's like, are you trying to be the other woman? You know who he's interested in, and it just makes it awkward and unnecessary. That Rose and Finn, no. And I just wish that they wouldn't have had that whole thing in there. There's so much that I wish they wouldn't have had, but yeah. So I do think that this book is worth reading for the extra stuff in it that is not in the movie. And as far as the Reylo parts, you knew we were going to get there eventually. I do think that it shows a little bit more of the Reylo relationship. And I think the most telling thing is in this whole book, like the most telling thing for me as far as the dynamic with Rey, Luke, Kylo, and that, is that Luke's bitterness really pushes Rey to Kylo. And it's really his fault again. Like, it's not really like played up in the movie of like, oh, another big mistake by Luke, but it was. He rejects Rey, and Rey really feels like she only has Kylo to go to. And he's there for her. She's left alone, and she's sad and desperate, and she feels like nobody understands. She immediately goes and seeks out that connection to Kylo. Whereas if Luke would have been teaching her this whole time and been there for her, I don't think that that would have been an issue. And yes, I know this is fiction and it's just a movie, but I'm just saying, this whole thing with Luke, really his bitterness and frustration about how things went with Kylo, again pushes Rey to Kylo. So, come on, Luke. Frustrating as it is, I think that the Reylo relationship actually is kind of one of the better aspects of the movie and the book, like I said. And you know that Kylo knows that Rey could have killed him in the throne room, but she left him and she has compassion for him. And you see a lot more of how they feel about each other. She feels that he has been wronged, and she really takes his side against Luke, probably because she's also been rejected by Luke. And it's really easy for her to imagine how Kylo as his nephew would feel when he tried to kill him. So that brings me to talking about the next book, which I will be reading. I've already got it on my Kindle. And I will just say that I do think that this book did not lead well into the next book. J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson were not on the same page. This is two very different ideas of the Force, how the Force works, how the whole universe is going to be, like how the whole story is going to be resolved. Rian Johnson seems to be very much setting up new things in the Force, and as far as the old needing to die and the old ways needing to go away, and even Kylo saying, kill the past and, let it all die, is very much seeming to lead into that for the next movie. And then, of course, the next movie turns out to just be this big nostalgia ride that's another Return of the Jedi, and we will talk about that. But I will say there's a lot to dislike about this, but I do appreciate some of what Rian Johnson did, and I do appreciate that he tried to do something completely different with Star Wars. It's the execution, and making Luke so dislikable, so just not a very good character in this, did hurt the overall feel of the movie for someone who really enjoyed that character. Also, introducing unnecessary stories and plot lines that just were uninteresting. This whole series can't seem to figure out if it's a big journey, like a buddy journey of Rey and Finn and Poe, or is it going to be everybody has their own destiny and everyone's separate and everyone's doing their own stuff. So the first one, it's, kind of bringing all of the people together, and then the second one, nobody's together, everybody's separate, and bringing in characters that were not present in the first movie that we don't know or care about. And then the third film brings everybody back again, and it feels rushed and forced, and like they're trying to create this closeness for these characters that isn't real. that's the thing with the books too. In the first book, that's when Poe meets Rey. So in the book, she meets him at the end of Force Awakens. In the movies, she meets him at the end of The Last Jedi, meaning Rey has just met Poe at the end of The Last Jedi, and supposedly by the time of the Rise of Skywalker, they're best friends, and everybody, like, they're all on a quest together again, which makes no sense. There's no lead up to that. There's no relationship established. And I will say that that's a weakness from all the directors, is not being able to make ties that seem strong enough to have the audience be invested in it. Sadly, the only relationship that had a ton of investment is Rey and Kylo. And if you're not a Reylo fan, then I can see that being really obnoxious, because Rey and Finn spend a day together in the first movie. Finn and Rose spend a few hours a day, I don't even know, not that long, and Poe and Finn spend a couple of hours together. And so the wrap up of the movies, which I will get into more in the next thing, just nothing feels earned. How dare you, son? Nothing feels like it was as emotionally invested. You know, you couldn't invest emotionally in it as much as the original series and even the prequels. And it seems to really struggle with establishing who should we care about. And even when it can give somebody a really great send-off and have them be a really great character who changes and has a great arc, it backs away from it. And I really think that Finn should have died in the end of this movie. I would have been sad if Poe died at the end of Rise of Skywalker, because holding on to these characters made no sense, and that they're just not that great. Sorry, I'm just going to be brutally honest. They're just, I was never emotionally invested in them enough to care if they died. So anyway, that's my thoughts on The Last Jedi. I definitely would say check it out if you're interested in learning a little bit more and having a little bit more backstory. And let me know what you think about Star Wars in the comments, and whether you love this film or hate it. I know this is super polarizing and had such mixed reviews, and I think critics loved it and audiences hated it, but I originally hated it. I mean, I was pretty frustrated with this movie, and then Rise of Skywalker came out, and I was like, okay, well, let's revisit this and see how I feel. So those are my thoughts. Let me know in the comments what you think, and yeah, thanks to everybody recently who subscribed and liked and commented. It's so great to meet people, and especially new people on BookTube, so thank you. And please subscribe to me for more content like this, and more Star Wars rants, and more book discussions. Thank you.